And we're live. It is Monday, June 8th, 2020, 5:01 p.m. Eastern Time. It is a beautiful day in Washington, D.C. There are a few more cars out on the streets. There are significantly more people out on the streets. They're a little bit less careful when they pass each other to give each other a wide berth. And yet, the signs of continued quarantine are everywhere. We're not all out at cafes. We are sitting at home. We are having a drink in splendid Zoom-connected isolation with one another. Some of us took a nap in the afternoon, which is not something we normally do on Monday afternoons, because though there are protests, though there are people everywhere ignoring the menace, we are still not allowed to have fun anymore. And that's why this is the 74th episode in a row of In Lieu of Fun. Because as long as we are not allowed to have fun, in lieu of fun, we will be here at 5 o'clock. And in lieu of fun today, we have Matt Yglesias, who I have literally never met before, though we have occupied much the Venn diagram overlaps of our lives is non-trivial. Hey, why don't you introduce Matt? And then I will tell you the story of why for many years I thought Matt Yglesias hated me.
Oh, I can't. Oh, I'm very interested in this story. Matt Yglesias kind of almost doesn't need an introduction. Matt is a friend of mine from back in my DC journo days. We had a brief overlap of a few days of living in a house that was fondly called the flophouse, which we will discuss later and tell stories about. But Matt is probably best known for an incredible blog that he was writing when we met. And like before that, you actually just published your first book. But you'd done center, I think it was a Think Progress, right? And then you'd taken it from Atlantic to Think Progress, and then you'd gone, and then where did you go from Think Progress? I forget.
I worked at Slate.
Yes, that's right.
And then we started Vox.
And then you started Vox with Ezra. And so now you are still at Vox and still disagreeing with people loudly on the internet.
Yes.
It's like you clearly didn't get the XKCD cartoon.
Yes, that's
but we are so happy to have you on the show. And I'm
really glad to be here.
Yeah. Are you drinking? And what are you drinking? You're drinking a giant beer. And
I'm drinking a giant sized Miller Lite. It is it's delightful. I don't really know what the point is in making the beers this big, but it's more fun.
No, but this is we're not allowed to have fun anymore.
Right.
It's more of a surrogate for fun. But,
yes.
So it explains. I mean, when somebody drinks a giant Miller Lite, they're making a statement of some kind,
yes.
Right? Either they're making a statement of a kind of anti-elitism, or they're.
I thought that they're making a statement they want more beer.
Right, or they're making a statement of gluttony, but then that kind of the light undercuts that. And so my question is, write the subtitles of your giant Miller Lite for us.
Well, the thing about the giant Miller Lite is that you have to drink it fast or it's going to get warm. So you're really committing yourself to drinking beer at a rapid pace. And I think like the low flavor Miller Lite is also, it's well suited to that,
And so to dump out the ends of a giant Miller Lite.
And so when Kate and I were young people, we had a lot of these around the old house.
Yeah, we were very poor. We were. To be fair, we were journalists on the internet before it was cool. So we were very poor.
That's why we lived in a house called the Flophouse, and we had Miller Lights, but it has just continued to be my thing. And so it was my birthday on May 18th, and my friend Tom came by with a bunch of giant Miller Lights for me, and now I've got them back again.
That's pretty.
I feel
awesome.
young again.
So,
tell the story about why you thought Matt Yglesias hated you.
That whole Matt on the internet, arguing with people on the internet thing.
Oh yeah.
So I was a editorial writer at the Washington Post at the time, and there was this young blogger who, whenever I would write something that I thought was earnest and serious, he would write this angry seeming response that I was just covering for conservatives, and I was.
Well, were you?
Well, sure, of course I was. I mean, in the sense that, when you're being earnest and trying to be sort of ecumenical, there's always more. There's always more. Wait, the other side has an interesting point here, but what about process? I mean, there are these questions that you raise that are always reasonably interpretable that way. And what I really wasn't used to was the tone of first of all, the immediacy of internet journalism, which, I worked for a daily, and the rhythm of writing once a day, and then somebody, you get into this rhythm where the response to what you write is not immediate, it takes place over the next few days as columnists engage it, and then you were one of the sort of first generation of political bloggers who, we would have something out early in the morning. It would, come out when the wads of newspaper hit people's doors. And by 9 o'clock, you would have denounced me. And so I would get to work and I'd be like, holy shit, this guy really
who's this
fucking
asshole?
hates me. Yeah, he's like really pissed at me. And, and the frustrating thing was like, I couldn't respond because, you're not allowed to write an editorial. Who is this guy, Matt Yglesias, and why doesn't he have the decency?
Oh, exactly.
To wait
we were just firing
reasonable...
away from behind our laptops at poor defenseless newspaper writers. And
exactly. And so I developed this idea that there was this guy, Matt Yglesias, who really didn't like me.
But I'm just unpleasant. In general,
and it never and I wasn't really disabused of that until Kate invited you on the show, and I warned her, that guy Yglesias, he really hates me. I mean, I'm happy to have him on the show, but and then she says, no, he's got no problem with you. And I was like, really? So then I had to think about, well, actually, I'm just responding to the first generation of internet blogging, political internet blogging 15 years ago. And I had to sort of rewind that tape. And I was like, no, I actually totally get what happened. So it's good to meet you.
I wish more people understood this, because now I think, I'm old, got Vox. I think I'm seen as a pillar of the establishment, an apologist. And, we've got the new young Twitter haters all the time yelling, taking their pot shots. And I just always, I was like, I used to be you. Not you.
You did used to be, yeah.
Yeah, it was a different time, in the world.
It was a totally different time. I mean, this is kind of like, I kind of feel like I did the exact right thing. It was like I went into academics. Like I was like, oh man, I just cannot be this poor and unstable for the rest of my life and be like a freelance journalist. And like, also I kind of realized, and this was really, I'll never forget this, like I watched like Spencer break stories, and like he lived for, this is Spencer Ackerman. He like lived for breaking a story. He lived for a good leak or investigative journalism.
Oh yeah.
That he like lived for it. And I saw it like turn into the digital version, which is even less fulfilling, of like wrapping fish in it the next day, and I just like couldn't handle it, like existentially. And like I was just kind of like, at least newspaper has a second use, like on the internet, like you don't even have that. And it was just and so I kind of,
but now here you are hosting a daily live webcast.
But that's true, because now I just like love, it's like I just kind of live in this moment, and I like love, but my point was like you were really great at this, Spencer was, and I think, and like I'm Ezra and everyone else obviously, but like I remember that there was a moment in which I was like, okay, that's just not going to be me. And I went back to I went back to school for, it ended up being like 9 years, and then yeah, and then like
Slacker.
came out and all of my friends owned media companies. all of the people that I had like been hanging out on porches drinking giant beers, like had actually, like they weren't poor anymore at all, or like we were doing whatever. And
let me tell you, the industry has worked out great. There's no financial problems in digital media.
Yes, exactly. Solid place to be.
We're
so
just
talk
coasting.
to us about that. We're all, for many years now, Vox has been this kind of powerhouse upstart, and you guys have, really shown, not just intellectual proof of concept, but financial proof of concept for a particular type of explanatory, policy-oriented writing. How is the current moment treating you guys?
Well, I mean, I can't, divulge too much. Obviously, it's not like a great time for anything that derives revenue from advertising. There has been a big sort of slump in that sector. We were aware, I think, I shouldn't say we, like the company was always aware that it didn't want to have like a single line source of revenue based on advertising, had been trying to diversify away from that, had been successfully diversifying away from that. But this particular crisis has also totally cut out live events, conferences, which was one of those more diversified pillars,
right.
Which is tough, particularly because that's like people's whole job, right? It's like doing experiential stuff, and, they're working on it. We're doing, live streaming things, but it's not quite the same. So it's hard to need to sort of rework one leg of your business on the fly while the mainstay is also under pressure. That being said, I think the company's management tried to be prudent during the fat times. I think more so than some of the other digital media startups, which I think frustrated everybody to some extent while it was happening. Everyone wants more money, wants more investment in this, that, or the other thing. But in retrospect, definitely looks like the right call, because, I don't think anyone predicted this particular sequence of events, but I do know that people on the business side of Vox Media were very well aware that a recession would happen one day, and that we'd have to be able to ride it out.
Right. The seven fat cows eat the seven lean cows eat the seven fat cows. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like actual prudent management of business.
Is that a Far Side cartoon?
Difficult thing.
No, it's the
Far
Bible.
Side cartoon.
What? It's the Bible?
The Bible,
yeah, it's
Jacob.
It's Jacob's dream, Joseph's dream.
I thought
it's someone's dream. It's the Pharaoh.
It's Joseph.
He advised him to stockpile grain, just like Ben Carson
exactly.
said.
That's good. I'm live on YouTube forever thinking that the Bible is Far Side.
Well, there's some continuity between the two.
I mean, there's probably a Far Side about it.
I mean, there's that great thing of like the cows flipping burgers. They had that, like, that famous one. Anyways.
Right. Well, that's actually Joseph's dream, the Pharaoh's dream too. And there's the famous Far Side cartoon about Joseph's interpretation of that dream. But that's a different conversation.
Is that real? Are you? I can't
no,
tell.
Kate, it's not. No.
I'm very gullible,
Cows
Ben. I can't believe you're just
flipping
realizing
burgers?
this. Uh,
Yeah,
um,
that was
but this-
big in ancient Egypt.
So you put that on Facebook and it'll just spread around, and
oh man, now you're getting into it on Facebook.
everybody will
Yeah.
hear it. Yeah.
All right, so we got to have the big showdown on Facebook.
But
I
no,
have no idea what this fight is about, so I'm just going to make up facts. In the red corner, we have Kate Klonick, who is itching for a fight with Matt Yglesias about Facebook, and I have no idea about what. In the blue corner, we have Matt Yglesias, who's already forgotten this offense he gave to Kate on the subject of the Facebook Oversight Board, and is wondering what the heck I'm doing here for her to like land gloves on me about something I said that I don't even remember. Go, Kate.
That is like the perfect introduction. I mostly
Facebook.
like that he's moved.
It's-
Like
it's
he's forgotten. I
bad.
can't even find the tweet because we both tweet so much.
Wait, no. So okay, wait. I can introduce it. Okay, so Facebook has some kind of oversight board, and Judd Legum was reporting on why it isn't up and running.
Yeah.
And there was some really lame sounding excuse, like they don't have laptops yet. And so then you were explaining that it's much more complicated than they just don't have laptops yet.
So I don't think you know this about me, which is that I've spent the last year embedded at Facebook writing 2 pieces that are going to basically like following the team of people around that built the oversight board. And
Right.
You
So you know what
picked
you're
a fight.
talking about.
You picked a fight,
It's an unfair
Matt,
advantage.
with the wrong person, because there are really only 2 academic authorities on the subject of the Facebook Oversight Board, and you're arguing with one of them. So this is a totally unfair fight.
Yeah, no, but that's why
should I
have
accuse you of having corrupt conflicts of interest?
No.
Would that be
Thank
a
you
good,
for
a good
doing
way
that.
to go here?
No, but like a lot of people do, and I have just painstakingly not taken any money from Facebook. Like I joke that like they have these like micro kitchens, and I like won't touch the Swedish fish because it's like the pomegranate. It's like the pomegranate
you won't
seed.
touch the fish.
No, it's like the pomegranate seed in who is it? I should probably know this.
Persephone.
Example. Yes, Persephone, exactly.
She flipped the burgers with the cows, and Joseph interpreted the dream.
Great. So no, but I was totally independently funded. I don't know. I just wrote these papers up, and so and it just launched, and I'm a little frustrated. I just get frustrated when it's something I'm really close to, and I have no problem with people legitimately criticizing it. But the thing that Judd was criticizing it for was that they didn't have laptops yet, and that wasn't why they were running. They're running because they're not up and running yet and taking on issues like Trump, because 1, it was never actually in the scope of their jurisdiction to take up issues like that. And then 2, even if it was, they launched like 4 weeks ago and all met each other over Zoom 4 weeks ago. And there's just no coherence to it as an independent body yet. And so it's kind of getting up and running in that sense.
But wait, what was your criticism of it?
Okay, so here's what.
You were like Facebook should cancel itself.
I don't know anything about Facebook, except that it's terrible. But like in a lot of the world, right? You don't just like build, I don't know what, a new kind of truck, and then you get the truck on the road and it doesn't work at all. And it's like putting out all kinds of crazy toxic fumes, and you're running people down left and right, and you maybe spark a genocide in Myanmar. And then every time somebody points this out, you're like, oh man, I'm so sorry. We're really working hard on it. I got this oversight board, right? And they're coming, but like, you got to understand, it's hard to put a board together. And like all the while, you're plowing down pedestrians, you're wrecking people's gardens, stuff like that. And Facebook has always, I mean, this is like a famous Zuckerbergism, right? But they have like, from the first day when Mark and I were in college, and he decided to break into a bunch of computer systems that steal people's ID photos and use them for face mash. And then when he got caught, say, oh man, I'm sorry. Like that's been his whole career, and it's made him fabulously wealthy, arguably the one of the top 5 most powerful people in the universe. And it's like a shockingly irresponsible way to behave. Like, it's one thing if you're 20 and like fucking around on campus, but like this is how he handles the information ecosystem. And like, it's totally true. Like, I don't know squat about this oversight board. It sounds really complicated. It sounds like it's hard to set up, right?
So wait a minute, before we
this is actually where the fight is.
So before we get into the oversight board, though, I just want to ask you, isn't that really the norm of the way major business empires are developed and built? So I'm thinking about the railroads, which, actually did exactly what you're describing. I mean, built, down to,
and use slave labor to build them.
Or use slave labor to build it. And when it got pointed out, the only difference between them and Zuckerberg is they didn't bother with the "I'm sorry" part. They argued, the dog and fire hydrant, or dogs and licking their balls, because we can. And and I don't recall the part where, John D. Rockefeller did the "oh, I'm sorry." He just gave a lot, started the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. I mean, isn't what Zuckerberg is doing absolutely the norm? The exception being saying, "oh, I'm sorry," and setting up repeatedly saying, "oh, I'm sorry," and the setting up of the oversight board. But like, what makes him different from a robber baron at any time?
Well, I don't know that he is. I just don't think that's like the normal discourse around it that they present to their employees, to say like, "yep, I'm like an evil robber baron out of the 1880s."
Carnegie presented to his employees either.
No. I mean, I'm sure, but yeah, I mean, like, I think that's right. I think it's not like unique in the annals of super rich and powerful people to be irresponsible. I mean, one difference between Facebook and railroads is that railroads are useful. And Facebook is just kind of dumb, but like, that's fine.
No, but that's not true, Matt. And that's overly, like, I think that's, so you act like this, like I actually think the railroads is a better metaphor than the truck, because like you act like it's one truck, but like, I will just use one example, and it's particularly poignant now, but like, right now, Facebook is like one of the reasons that people are able to connect with each other and like have meaningful relationships. And whether it's just olds being on like on it, and like my grandmother being able to use it, like that's something. And then I would say that there's also kind of like, even more importantly for democracy, like, there's stories like Philando Castile. Like, we never would have heard, like, that was literally Facebook live streamed onto the platform. And that, like, I think that was a pretty nobody remembers it anymore and how significant it was, but it set off, like, at the time, like a series of, it was right after the Alton Sterling shooting, that had been captured on video. The black man that was outside a convenience store selling like counterfeit DVDs and then shooting.
Yeah.
And I only remember this so well because I was finishing up this huge paper on this, and it was my birthday, and it was like, which is around July 4th. And there was the shootings of police officers in Dallas in protest. Do you remember this? Like all of this kind of stuff. And so like, but all of that was like literally because we saw Black people being brutalized by police forces in front of our faces every day. Like, what would do that if Facebook didn't do that? And that's something. Like, I think that's a good something, frankly.
Sure. I mean, look, like, good things have happened on Facebook. But I mean, I think that we look, at the whole on Facebook's impact. I mean, people do studies, try to do experimental studies on what happens if you get people off Facebook. It tends to make them happier. Facebook seems to be...
But people are happier if they're not reading the news.
Yes. Good for them. Facebook seems to be like destroying, not single-handedly, but contributing to the destruction of media, like journalism business models, driving political polarization, and now seems to have adopted a policy of letting a Bush administration political operative set their editorial policies
Wait, who is this? Who? Which
You mean
one?
Joel Kaplan?
Yeah.
Oh, Joel's. Yeah.
So,
Yes.
that's fine. And I mean, like Ben was saying, I mean, they're trying to make money, right? So like if spreading disinformation will help them make more money, they do that. If they can get regulatory favors from Trump, they can do that. If Peter Thiel wants to extirpate American democracy, they can help do that. They can say they're doing things for free speech reasons. When that helps Trump, they can help the Vietnamese government do censorship when that helps them there. And, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think there's a lot of companies with sort of dubious ethics out there, but Facebook happens to be operating in my universe where people are earnestly trying to,
No, I
provide
completely.
factual information to people, and it's
So
a
this
little
is
irksome.
but this is like
I
a
mean, they're
good.
buying some ads on my podcast now, though, so I think I'm not supposed to say this bad stuff.
Oh, whatever. It's like complete. But I actually think that like I'm actually interested
Don't
to
watch
hear
this show, Mark.
Wait, what did you say? Are you shilling for them?
Just hope Mark doesn't watch this show.
No, he watches every
Cool.
day.
We got that.
He's MZ in our audience, and sometimes we bring him in to ask questions.
Yeah, shit.
You guys joke. Okay, I'm not even gonna say it, but like whatever. I've spent way too much time being watched by Facebook. So I actually, there's the one thing that I will say is that like it's never been clear to me, like every time government is wrong or anytime something is wrong, that like the solution is throw it all out. And like, I just don't think that that's necessarily the solution for Facebook. I feel like we did that with the AOL Time Warner merger. And that's like one of the reasons we have Facebook. And so like, I just think that like, if there was a vacuum in the space that like Facebook is in, it would maybe be worse than like the cure would be worse than the disease. To use a Trumpism, I think he coined that phrase.
Can I ask just
Yeah.
Isn't Facebook's basic business is connecting people and right? Like that's essentially what they do. And I'm interested for your response to the following highly reductionist analysis. Basically, they connect people and kind of connect people whether they want to be connected or not. There are, a lot of people I knew in high school and college that I'd be just as happy to not be connected to, and Facebook has kind of forced me to. And the value, positive or negative, of Facebook is exactly proportional to how good or bad it is for certain groups of people to be connected. So if you're talking about, trans 12-year-olds who find each other in a group around the world, that's really lovely. They have opportunities to do all kinds of things and get to know people like them. But if you're talking about white supremacists and disinformation operations reaching large numbers of people, we say that's kind of a bad thing. And so I feel about Facebook a little bit the way I feel about firearms, which is, you got to tell me who's using it and for what before I can assign a moral value to it. Your thoughts?
Right. Well, so, a long time ago, there used to be this idea, Web 2.0, right? Now, Kate's going to have to interrupt me at some point when I start getting things wrong. But this was a time there was a lot of stuff starting up, and some of it was like Flickr and some of it was blogs, right? And I think a lot of it had the structure that you are talking about, Ben. It was people using the communications medium of digital technology to make connections with each other. And all of these things had a structure that Facebook also had in its original form. I was a very OG Facebook user. And it was, you would pick certain people to follow, and then Facebook would show you their content in a fairly unmediated sort of reverse chronological order kind of thing. You would opt into it, and it could be a good experience, it could be a bad experience. I could be a huge asshole on my blog, but like only the readers saw, right? Something Facebook eventually discovered was that they could have a better product. product, they could be stickier. If instead of it just being whatever random stuff whoever you happen to be connected with was posting, they devised whatever machine learning methods to show people things that their algorithms believed would increase your engagement online. And that helped make them a very successful company. Obviously, if you deliberately feed people the most engaging stuff, if you're good at it, which they are, they have a lot of smart people working on this, you can get people to spend a lot more time on your site, on your app, stuff like that. And that's why they're such a juggernaut. And, you know, Tumblr and Flickr and so many of these other companies that started in that same era eventually fell by the wayside, right? As Facebook was better technically. They solved this problem, and they bought Instagram and they put some of that same know-how to work there as well, which is great. I mean, it's a business. They're trying to make money, but it takes you out of that domain where I think you can just say, well, look, this is a neutral communications technology. Like email, the fact that we can email changes the world in some very fundamental ways, but it's just a tool. There's no guy who's like, I'm in charge of email, and here's how I'm gonna make it work. Here's how I'm gonna manipulate it. And I just think something that we have seen with Facebook is that there are systematic consequences to imposing an editorial policy, because it's a technology company, right? Ben, you worked in newspapers, and of course, I'm sure the Washington Post, just like Vox, like they wanted to sell copies of the paper. They wanted to get subscribers. They wanted to get clicks online. But if you said in a meeting, hey, let's put this on the front page, the story's not important at all.
Right, but
it's not even true, but people will buy it. Somebody else, because it's a company of journalists, somebody will be like, well, Ben, like we can't put a story on the front page that isn't true.
Right. They'd be like,
we're doing
that
something
would be wrong.
Right. And it's the same thing. Like, I don't want to say every Vox article is good, but we're trying to make them good. If you said in a meeting, like, that doesn't make sense, that's not right, people would take it seriously. And the engineering mindset does not do that. It is too good. It is too effective, right? It doesn't have what we would consider an ethical editorial filter that says, like, is this important? Is this what people need to know? It just says, will people engage with this? And it's effective. It's devilishly effective, but it's bad for the world.
So this is fascinating, and I'm going to respond by talking about, I'm going to tell a story. I graduated from college in 2006. I got a job somehow as an associate producer at ABC News, specifically on their website. And so I would go in every day, and I had no idea. I had no business being at this company, but abcnews.com had no business being on the internet as far as I'm concerned. Like 2006, it was completely forgotten entity of the redheaded stepchild of ABC. I literally had a desk that was a shelf. It was like a shelf with like a monitor perched on it, and like I would like type on like a 6-inch thing. There was like nothing for armrests. Anyways, it was terrible. But at some point when I was working there, I'll never forget this story. A very high vice president at ABC News forwarded something to one of the editors at abcnews.com and said, publish this. Okay. And she forwarded it to me and said, the vice president said to publish this and we should publish it. And it was a chainmail. That was a picture of pigs dressed in tiger costumes, suckling at a mother tiger. And there was all of this it was clearly fake. And it was like there was like all of this accompanying text that was like, oh, the mother like lost all of her tiger cubs. And so they gave her these like piglets to like console her because she wasn't eating, and like blah, 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 and like this whole thing. And I literally just like, I was like, this is garbage. And we're going to get hit by standards if we publish this. And she was like, my editor was like, make a slideshow, Klonick, make it. And I was like, no, this is garbage. I'm not going to publish this. And like, they were like, make a slideshow. People will eat this up. And I was like, pigs in tiger costumes. And I Googled it in front of the editor, and it was like fake news. Like literally, like they didn't have a word for it yet. We didn't call it fake news, but it was like on snow. It was like, this is not real. And I was like, and they were, it's like, it turns out it's a cohabitation zoo in, like, all the pictures were taken at a cohabitation zoo in Beijing, which specializes in raising like opposite animals together.
Pig tigers.
Right, like pig tigers. And so it's like tigers. So anyways, they made me run it. They made me run it anyway. They ran it anyway.
Yeah.
And like, I'm really sorry, but that's fucking ABC News. Okay. And like that, and I got screamed at. I was like, no, you don't know what, like, when the vice president sends you something like this. And that was in 2006. And so like, we never got the rights to the photos that ran online. Like it completely was like, it was.
I wonder if it's still on there.
What? I don't know. I don't.
While you guys are
literally.
talking,
I like.
while you guys are talking, I'm gonna see if like the internet ever forgets. It was on ABC News.
But this is like, how can you? But here's the thing.
But that's like, terrible, Kate. Though, right? Like, so you tell that to me, and I say it's terrible. And you worked in journalism. You know a lot of journalists. If you tell that story to people who work in journalism, how many of them say to you, "Well, what are we going to do?" Right? Like, that's a horrible story about somebody who's being very unethical. If that came out. Like, that's
I probably shouldn't talk about it so openly, actually.
No, but
like, whatever.
That's what I'm saying. That's really embarrassing for ABC, right? Like, people who work in the industry, like people who work at ABC now, who weren't even there then, if they heard that story, they would be embarrassed by it. And they would probably say, oh, you got to understand the website.
Oh, man, I found it.
Did you really? I wrote those fucking captions. I wrote those captions, Ben. Did you really find it?
Yeah. February. Oh, wait, hang on. That's not it.
Okay. Did they run it again? Like, weird. But it probably would have been in October or November of 2006.
It says December 3rd, 2007.
Oh, maybe they ran it again, but it wasn't.
But it's not ABC News. It's ABC 7 Chicago. I wonder if it got passed around some of the ABC
it totally
affiliates.
gets passed around the affiliates. It's probably
there you go. Like, that's the dream.
Anyway,
I'm pulling it up here. I'm gonna. If it ever loads, it's on. It's running at internet 2007 speed.
Okay, but I want to hear what Matt. So like, okay, so yes, but no, a lot of people actually in journalism are like, yeah, we've got stories like that too.
Right.
Like,
no, look, but I mean, so here, you guys are lawyers, right? Both of you.
No, just me.
Kate's a
I'm
real
the
lawyer,
only
I'm a
journalist
fake lawyer.
and lawyer. I'm the Venn diagram of the two of you.
Wow, sweet. But so, okay, so like in certain lines of work, right? Law, journalism, medicine, we have professional ethics, right? That people follow. And in other things they don't, right? It's like legendarily used car salesman. His only job is to put you in a car, right? Now, do doctors do unethical things sometimes? Do they upsell clients on treatments they don't need sometimes? Like, yes, they do. But if you went to a meeting of doctors or whatever, and you started telling a story about the time you roped some sucker into a open heart surgery he didn't really need to make a quick buck, everybody would be horrified, right? Whereas if you go at a salesman conference, I mean, I love salesmen. We have ad salesmen in Fox, but there's a certain way, right? Sales guys talk about selling. And in a lot of lines of work, it would be considered very unethical to behave that way. And journalism, it has its own ethics. Now, do things happen just for clicks or for bad reasons? Are there compromises made in the real world? Like, yes, absolutely. But there is some kind of constraint, and it's a delicate, like, social fabric, right? Like norms. We talk about this with Trump all the time, but like norms matter in a Republican society where people need to uphold some kind of sense of decency. And while there's a lot of wonderful people working in the technology industry and like a ton of smart people and sort of well-meaning people, they don't have that same approach to things. And as they moved from the kind of realm of sort of social networking per se, connecting people, and you can see whose birthday is what and get a message from your old friend from high school, into the sharing and dissemination of news, they have stumbled into a terrain that for a while in America has been heavily sort of ethics bound. I take it that the point of this oversight board is that they are now trying to stumble toward some kind of solution for this. That
They're
you
trying to
can't
create
treat
a
it
system
as
of appeals so that people are just not like systematically censored by the platform.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, a system of appeals where you can explain it to me, but it seems like they were trying to get a panel of dignitaries, right? Of like well-regarded people who we would think are making these decisions like for the right reasons, not to maximize clicks.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
We're
No, for
supposed
sure.
to. So I mean, that's I don't know about the details or like how it works, but that is the right spirit, right? That is saying, okay, we have some kind of an obligation here that is different from the like commercial imperative to get people to use the platform that so I don't actually know.
That's kind of like, I actually
why.
think that reputationally, like the oversight, like, okay, so here's the thing, like when you say like maximize clicks, but if you have like global distrust in your brand, no one's going to fucking be there to click anything. Right. And so like, if you have a reputation as being overly censorial, or you have a reputation of not like addressing harms sufficiently, then all of that is bad for you. Here's the thing about the oversight board is that it brilliantly takes all of that and makes it somebody else's problem. It takes it all and makes it the oversight board's problem. Like this group of kind of 20 to 40 dignitaries that are going to be doing this and like making all of these free speech hard choices and harm principle choices and everything else. But the thing about that is that I don't actually know that I think that that's a bad idea. Even though it's good for Facebook, I think it'll be both good for Facebook's bottom line. So they'll do it, or they have done it. And then because like they don't get yelled at, they can point over like not it and like point at the oversight board. But also like, I don't want a bunch of like sociopaths in Silicon Valley making my speech policies for talking online. And so like, I'm fine with like a global board of dignitaries doing it instead. I guess it's still not ideal, and like a bunch
I don't know. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think on that level, it's a correct recognition that the kinds of people that the internal office culture that they have there does not generate the kind of decision making that people want, right? Like you want to think that Dean Baquet at the Times, or Marty Baron at the Washington Post, or Lauren Williamson, our editor-in-chief in Vox, you want to think that those people are like, they're just about the news, man. They want to get the important stories done, right? And it's of course never like really, really true, but it's at least approximately true. And to be a good editor, because this is the culture of newsrooms, people need to believe that you're making these calls for the right reasons. And that's not what they have at Facebook. That's not their culture. That's not their staff. So they need to build some kind of an external system that has a different kind of person at it. And I think the question is
a different type of incentive structure.
Right.
Is what you're saying. Yeah. Like,
and
this
I think
is
the question is how will they relate to each other? Actually, because it's weird to have like a little group of, I don't know what, like nannies looking over your shoulder.
Well, it's like an edit. Well, like you've been. I mean, when I was you've been at a magazine, like literally, you've been at a newspaper.
I have.
And I don't know what it was like at the Washington Post, but like editorial and advertising just sat like literally on separate sides of the office, and like really were not talking to like each other. That like wasn't a thing. Like,
and then they don't like each other. I mean, you get along, but
it's salespeople versus versus journalists.
And the traditional newsroom culture, at least, is to have a big a cultural void between those groups of people, and that's changing as things sort of come under different kinds of pressure. But it's getting back to where I started, it's a question of, to me, like, will this be ramped up quickly? Because to the extent that it serves to, as you say, give them something to point to, right? Being able to say, well, it's in the works is almost like good enough.
It's been in the works for 18 months, and they funded it with a lot of money, $130 million.
That's a lot.
Enough to float it for like 6 years.
Not a dime of it goes to me.
Yeah, not enough. What's my line, Ben? I think I'd say, like, I'm going to be poor and write about Facebook for the rest of my life. All of these like fancy Harvard professors get these giant like consulting checks. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm just going to like write about you. No, I mean, I do think it'll be up
you
and
have ethics
things by September, but I mean, it's
so
like,
I want to.
What are they supposed to do? I still don't really understand this.
Okay, I can talk about that in a second. But we have a question from Lieu, and Ben probably wants to show something.
No. I have shared in the chat both the underlying residual. There are no pictures left of Kate's slideshow as hijacked by ABC in Chicago, and the Snopes article debunking the whole thing. So Kate's story, fact check, true. No, the internet never forgets. And I don't think a whole lot of people at ABC are spending time being embarrassed by this, though I certainly agree with Matt that they should be. Lieu, you have a question about the future of another industry that's supposed to radically democratize everything.
Yeah, so I was wondering, every other of these internet industries and even cable have consolidated over the years, and it seems like podcasts themselves are going to as well. And I know there's already one called Luminary that is sort of a channel for them. So I'm wondering what you see for that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I can argue this either way, Matt. I can look at it and say, look, you can, when the big boys come into podcasting as they are, they suck all the air out of the room. And yet you can also look at it and say, gosh, when the coronavirus happened, I don't know, something like 1,000 new podcasts cropped up. And the good ones that everybody wants to listen to are not the ones that are produced by the big boys. So what do you think? Is this an area where that's ultimately, like everything, going to favor the big players? Or is it an area that real, like, local small person creativity has a future?
I mean, I try not to be optimistic about anything in the media business these days, because you can avoid disappointment. The saving grace of podcasts right now is that podcast audiences are very valuable. So a relatively small group of people, as long as they listen to you in a loyal and reliable way and really value your show, you can make some real money selling ads to those people. And a lot of times, at least on my show, like, I read the ads, right? Which is a little schlocky, like the sort of worst of AM radio type stuff, and not I think what they would teach you in journalism school. But I
have a question about that.
Yeah.
When you say on an ad that you use a product, what does it mean?
It means I've used it.
But does it mean, like, you read, like, there are all these ads where people are saying, I read this, I used Tommy John underwear, or I read this book. And does it, do you think the integrity of the person reading it hinges on those statements being true? And, or do we have like as a journalist, you have to say everything you have to say is true except ad copy?
I think you got to find a way to come up with something true to say that meets the sales mission. But I was going to say it's obviously a compromising position to put yourself in. But to me, it actually creates an editorial product that has more integrity than anything else I do on the internet, because you can monetize a loyal audience in a fairly intense way and not need to worry as much about virality or search engine optimization. You can try to actually really serve, your subscribers and give them something that's good, give them something that's valuable, something that they recommend to their friends. Can bigger players just aggregate that all up and sort of crush it? Maybe. It depends, I think, on whether just sheer economies of scale in the targeting of the ads is able to swamp the kind of value of those individual reads, right? It may be. That's what we came to see on the internet, right? Is that the ad sales and distribution works efficiently at a very centralized level. Because they, I don't know exactly how ad tech works, but it's like they know who all the readers are, the sort of like big centralized players. And so even though little niches can have audiences, and it's great for like nonprofits, right? I mean, like Lawfare, right, can distribute a high quality publication with not a lot of overhead, which is like the genius of the internet. But as a commercial advertising platform, it's proven to have a lot of centralizing power, even as on the production side, it kind of disaggregates. In podcasts, so far, we don't have that, right? Having each host sort of do their own read is the best way to do the advertising. And that means advertising on lots and lots of small shows kind of makes sense, even though the sales process is super duper annoying. But they may come up with something that suits the clients better.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with that. I mean, I have really kept Lawfare away from ever being dependent on advertising, though we do some advertising on the podcast, and we have some Google ads on the site. But I've really kept it away from that ever being a major source of revenue. I think the podcasting world is different from the web world. When we wanted to, and the reason it's different is that it is so radically intimate.
Mm-hmm.
When you go listen to, when you listen to a podcast, you're often listening to it during your commute, while you're running or exercising. People listen to them in the shower, and there's a real feeling of connection that people have to podcast hosts, particularly ones who kind of are really engaged with their subject matter in a deep way and are not simply reading a script, that is very hard to replicate.
Right.
There is, Mike Pesca is not a commodity. You can't just, yank him out and put in somebody else to do the gist.
Right.
And I think that may be different from other industries where it turns out that a lot of people can write web copy for, for
for tiger pigs.
Yeah, a lot of people can write that, as it turns
people
out,
that just graduated from college,
including Romanians who just make it up, right? Which that was an example of without the Romanians. And so I think it's an interesting question whether it's just a new iteration. And by the way, this medium is an example of that too. The big YouTubers none of them, as best as I can tell, are major commercial entities. They're individuals who, have some ineffable charisma to some significant audience.
Yep.
Should we? I would know that we have to wrap soon. We have a bunch of questions, but we're not going to be able to get to them because I'm going to use my trump card as host and basically insist that Matt and I talk about the Flophouse for a few minutes to close out.
Oh, sure.
Flophouse.
Yeah.
Go.
Yes, the Flophouse.
So so Matt, and while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up the New York Times article that was about it. But tell everyone what the Flophouse is.
Well, it's a house. It's a group house that I used to live in with Spencer Ackerman and Kristen Capps and a couple others. And then Kate moved in shortly before I moved out. And I don't know who else moved in there. But it's just a group house in Washington, D.C. It's a sort of common thing, single family home meant to have 4 or 5 bedrooms, but instead a lot of 20-somethings lived in it. There was something weird. For some reason, it didn't have real floors.
It didn't have.
How would you characterize those floors?
It didn't have. No, they were literal. The floors were plywood. They were just plywood. There was no flooring.
Plywood nailed down and painted a gross color of blue.
A really gross color of blue, like kind of like just a sad blue. There was nothing like. It was just like sad. It was just like pale and not bright and not happy. It was just like a very sad, dirty blue.
Slightly nausea-inducing. Windows that wouldn't open. It was great. It was a terrible house, and it was owned by a naval officer who was stationed in Hawaii, and he had hired some kind of management company to run it for him.
Okay.
Except when I lived there, the management company stopped forwarding him the rent and just told him it was vacant.
Is that true?
Yeah, no, I had to testify in a lawsuit about this. Which wound up clearing up a lot of things about like why the heat would never get repaired and other stuff like that.
It was not great.
Yeah, but we were profiled in the New York Times by Ashley Parker, who went on to do much more serious things.
This is the picture of the main room in the Flophouse. That's Spencer. That's Kristen. That's Matt. Back in the day,
when I had hair.
Yeah, that's the kitchen. That's the door being pretty much like always propped up with toilet paper. That didn't change.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. I think that
that was a good chair we had.
And
that was a good chair.
There are many group houses in kind of dives in Washington. So what was the significance? Was it from like the Flophouse where cool young journalists live? What was the theme of the story?
It's that we were bloggers at a time when that was a thing, and
so
people would be like, "Ooh, blogs."
Yeah, it was really the title of the New York Times story was "Washington Doesn't Sleep Here," and it is where we're blogging from. And it's 2008, and it's the Texas and Ohio primary returns in. Oh man, this is going to take you back. Senator Hillary Clinton begins her victory speech. Everyone's making jokes about Hillary's victory speech. Tom Lee. Oh, there's Tom. That's the person that bought Matt the giant beers for his birthday.
See,
Matt Yglesias, 26, looking up from the couch where he had been updating his blog in the Atlantic Monthly's website every 20 minutes.
And did you see how they spelled website back then?
Yeah, that's weird.
God. That is so funny. And then he says, Tom is still a software architect, brings the party to a halt when he holds up a mess of wires and asks, is anyone going to be in serious professional trouble if I knock out the internet for a minute?
Pretty funny.
This is amazing. It's like the Flophouse. And then you kind of go through, sorry for scrolling quickly, but I want to get to I want to just focus on, there's Ezra. And the Washington Independent, where Laura McGann, your politics editor, was an editor, and Spencer was working for it, and Dave Weigel, who is
I think that's Laura.
Is that Laura? Oh, that is Laura. You're right. I think totally her stockings, and I think
I don't want to say I recognize her leg, but you know.
No, that's totally her. I think that's Ben in the background. That looks like Kay or something. But anyways, look at that old computer.
Yes. Plastic.
It's so crazy. Anyways,
I still have that TV though.
I usually prefer the blue chair, Mr. Yglesias said, describing where he likes to work when he's not at his office or a local coffee shop.
So this is where you were writing all those mean things about me.
Yes.
Now I have context with those blue floors. I would have been grumpy too.
Oh God. Wait. Hold on. We have to come back. I'm going to share my screen one more time because there is a picture of
Wreck. What a good boy.
So, but you can see the blue floors and gross detail here.
Yes. And a somewhat gross dog.
Yeah, the dog. Yeah, I mean, absolute heart, but like kind of gross. I loved Rec so much, but Rec was Kristen's dog, and he shed like no other dog I've ever met. And
yes, he shed a lot, and the other dog pooped on the floor sometimes.
Kingsley?
Yeah.
It sounds really.
It was complete chaos.
You're making me like feel nostalgic for a youth I didn't participate in.
It was just weird that the New York Times sent a talented young reporter who has gone on to be she's gone on to be a major force in political journalism, but this was what they felt she should be doing at that time. Well, is writing about our.
We're all very lucky that she didn't just rage quit over having to cover the Flophouse.
It was better than a fake story about tiger pigs, I guess.
Oh my God!
Ashley Parker on the show to talk about this particular triumph in her journalistic career. Matt Yglesias, it's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Kate, who do we have for tomorrow?
Larry Lessig.
Ooh,
tomorrow is Larry Lessig, former presidential candidate, if only very briefly, Harvard law professor, author of he's one of those people, Code is Law, one of the few people you can boil his whole essence down to a single catchphrase. It's kind of awesome, like Hobbes had, nasty Brutus in short, and Lessig has Code is Law. I haven't seen Larry in many years. It'll be great to catch up. And then Wednesday we have
Matt Miller.
Matt Miller, former spokesman of the Justice Department and general wit. And Thursday we have Bill Kristol, and Friday we have Catherine Rampell from the New York Times. So it's a heck of a week. And until tomorrow at 5:00, Kate, what do we say?
We can't have any fun anymore. So I already know I started this one out bad. We can't have fun anymore. So in lieu of fun, come hang out with us and
blue plywood floors.
Yeah.
Thank you.